I. Now, this bill has already passed the Rhode Island Senate, but this bill has opponents. 10 protesters, all members of ACT NOW, an AIDS advocacy group, sat on the floor of the state health director's office holding hands. Their silent protest was against the proposed mandatory AIDS testing.
We think that that type of testing is inappropriate. It's very expensive, and it really doesn't do anything to help stop the spread of AIDS.
After an hour, state police offered an ultimatum.
So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a warning that if you do not leave, we're going to arrest you.
4 left, 6, several of them brown students, remained. They quietly ate their lunch, and then they were arrested.
People, if you will not leave, we're going to arrest you. What's your choice? Arrested. Be arrested. Okay. Come on out. No.
Legislate to educate, not discriminate. Cheering supporters greeted them as they were placed in police cars and driven away. All right, Mr. Shane, way to go, honey! ACT NOW's actions were applauded by the Rhode Island Project AIDS president, Ken Fish.
There are some parts of that legislation that are absolutely offensive. They're offensive to everyone who has worked in the area of AIDS. They are offensive to people who care about individuals' rights. They are offensive, frankly, I think, to many of the people who voted for the bill. We have searched the literature, and there is absolutely nothing in the research that substantiates any public health reason for mandatory testing of the people that they're proposing to test.
Senator James D'Ambra sees it differently. He's the primary sponsor of the AIDS testing bill.
What we have to do in the state today is to try to find out who those individuals are, get them proper counseling, get them proper education to prevent the further spread and transmission of this disease.
As for those protesters, they have been charged with obstruction. Now, joining me now is Dr. Denman Scott, the state health director. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. My first question has to be, what was your reaction when you heard that protesters spent several hours in your office today? We know you weren't there.
Well, I think, Virginia, this is all in the spirit of our democracy and giving everybody an opportunity to speak out in peaceful and appropriate ways. I, of course, disagree with the group and would make the point that the opposition, while very vocal and focused, is very small. Most of the people in this state, and I've talked to very many of them, think that what we're proposing makes enormous sense and will go a long way towards helping us control this terrible disease.
Well, how do you answer the question of confidentiality? How do you guarantee them their privacy, those who are tested?
Well, the best way to guarantee confidentiality is simply not to tolerate breaches in confidentiality. We do this in 2 ways. One, have protection in the law so that if anybody breaks the law, they can be fined or imprisoned. And the other way is in the workplace. If someone who does let this information out is caught, they ought to be punished up to and including losing their job. Doing that will go a long way towards keeping this information secure.
And Dr. Scott, we know that there are approximately 160 reported cases of AIDS in Rhode Island since you started recording this in 1981. What is your estimate on how many undiagnosed cases there are in Rhode Island?
I think close to 3,000 probably are harboring the virus. They're, in a sense, sort of time bombs. It takes up to 5 years, sometimes even 10 years, for a person to become ill with AIDS. But it's important to note that while they're carrying the virus, they can spread it to others. And it is important for infected people to know if they are carrying the virus in order to protect people that are close to them, take proper precautions.
We thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Denman Scott, head of the State Health Department. Patrice?
Thank you, Virginia. And as you mentioned, Virginia, the AIDS testing bill has already passed the Senate. Hearings on the measure begin in the House on Wednesday.